Welcome to the Athletes in Motion podcast, from race to recovery, with your hosts, Tom Riegel and Kenny Bailey.
Hey, Kenny, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Tom, how are you?
I'm fantastic as well, thanks. I'd like to welcome Emily Cole to the show today. We're really excited to have Emily on. Welcome, Emily. She's a student athlete, an all-American track and field athlete at Duke University. She also has a podcast and a book that's out, along with a whole bunch of other things. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you for having me, Kenny. I'm so excited to be here.
Tell us your story. How'd you get started? What's the process with your athletics?
Yeah, so I'm a senior this year at Duke on the track and cross country teams. And I actually took a gap semester my sophomore year. That's when I was able to start writing my book. So I am a little bit behind in academics and I have a whole nother year of eligibility, which is exciting. So I'm kind of a senior, kind of not. But what's cool is I got into running super late. So I actually did volleyball and basketball up until my senior year of high school. So I still feel like I'm kind of just getting started running and really still falling in love with it and love the day in, day out process. So I did volleyball and basketball up until that senior year. And then whenever I started focusing on running at that same time, I started eating healthier. And it was just crazy the difference that I felt in my health and my performance and my whole life changing. And so that's what really inspired me to fall in love with sports nutrition and the science behind it, because I grew up eating whatever I wanted all the time. I had fast food, sugary cereals, like there was no control on anything. It was kind of whatever I wanted it, which was great. And I definitely developed a healthy relationship around eating whenever I was hungry, but maybe not exactly the right things that I needed. So that's why I was so fascinated by it whenever I did start paying a little more attention to that. And now I've been able to write a book about it to kind of educate the next generation about sports nutrition, because I can dig into it a little bit later, but I basically got super fascinated by it, super into sports nutrition and eating healthy, and then took it a little bit too far and was a little too focused on making sure everything I was eating was healthy and drinking too much water with not enough electrolytes in it. So I got super low in sodium and ended up going into a 2-day coma from that. And after that, since it's so counterintuitive to society's idea of healthy, I was too low in salt and too much water. I really just felt like creating this guide that taught both the fundamentals of sports nutrition and how to find balance along that journey was super important to helping protect the next generation of athletes. And I agree with y'all's definition of athletes in that everyone fits underneath that. It's not if you just play an organized sport.
Yeah. So
great. It was a great podcast. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah. And so what got you started on the nutrition side of it? What was that trigger in high school that you said, all of a sudden, I want to eat better? I mean, because we're at that age. I mean, most of us get into nutrition later on in life when our bodies start to change and we're like chasing after our youth. You're young at this point. You're making some decisions. I mean, I just ate more hamburgers. I just ate more garbage type food. What was that trigger that said, hey, you know what? I want to be better. I want to eat better?
It's funny, it wasn't anything super normal, I'd say. I had two kind of random different factors that ended up coming into play. And then after I just kind of listened to those. So first I was just kind of scrolling on the App Store and I found an app that kind of taught you how to track your macros. And I just kind of dabbled with that for a little bit and was fascinated by how much it taught me about what carbohydrates, fats, and protein were and how to build a balanced meal and making sure I was eating enough and helping me feel energized for practice the next day. And then also I actually was dating a guy at the time whose family is super into cooking healthy and nutrition. And so going over to their house and having home cooked dinners and seeing how they valued nutrition and health inspired me to get into it as well.
Nice.
So it's fascinating to think, because that at that age, right, back to Tom's point, people are just sort of going out, hitting the pizza joint, doing whatever they need to do. Did you feel a sense of abnormality, for lack of a better term? Like you're doing something that's like, I know you had a boyfriend, so you probably had a support system there, but when your friends were looking at the way you're eating, you're like, wow, that's weird. Why can't you just, why can't you just be with us? Or did you balance it a little bit more? Were you trying not to lean in too hard, or how committed to you were? And were your friends sort of supportive, or were they just sort of like, okay, she's just being weird? Was there a struggle there?
That's a great question. And I would say I definitely was more isolated from my friends because I was living such a different lifestyle at the time. I was always kind of taught to be more comfortable with that growing up because I had two older sisters who were 8 and 9 years older than me and were always spewing wisdom onto my young brain. And they really helped me feel comfortable with not being on the in crowd and doing exactly the same thing as what everyone else was doing, because in 5 years that would pay off exponentially. And I've been talking about this a lot recently, but I actually read The 4-Hour Work Week in high school, which is counterintuitive because I wasn't working, but it really, really taught me great skills and values about how important every hour of every day is, and how if you're willing to go against the curve and not do the same thing as everyone else, those hours that you build up and save doing, committing to something that really builds you towards your bigger goals can really add up to something big in the long run, even if it might seem annoying at the time, or like you're not with everyone at the time. In 5 years, they'll be like, whoa, how did you do that? And it's like, well, all those different hangouts I didn't go to, or all those different meals that I had healthy. And it's like, that's the kind of commitment that it takes to be able to get to those bigger goals later on.
Is that part of the reason why you were because you switched over from basketball and volleyball, correct? Is that what you said?
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very team-oriented sports, especially in high school. And you're probably on the varsity, right? And you're doing great. And those are very, those things are very tightly knitted, right? You all kind of go as a pack, right? And then you split off and started running. Was it something? It's just fascinating to go from those sports that you're really good at to just a non sequitur, if you will, right? Running's usually the punishment of those other sports. But what was that decision point on why running became sort of the thing?
So I had always been pretty, decently talented at running. I wasn't super, super great, but I was able to kind of just hop in after not training all of, the summer because I was doing volleyball or whatever, and still be able to make varsity, still be able to compete well in the meets. And since I had been splitting myself so much across the other sports, my coach he believed so much in me, and he just really was on me since, 8th grade. He was like, you could be an incredible cross country runner if you would just commit and dive in. And I was like, I hate cross country. There's no way I will do that. And I actually ended up quitting cross country my sophomore year of high school. But then that senior year, the summer before, whenever I did start eating healthier and I wasn't doing volleyball and basketball anymore, I actually started feeling great while running and like really enjoying every single practice and every single workout. It was like, I looked forward to the workouts and being able to push myself and get better. And it was like, I had this whole new idea and mentality around the sport and around running. And it was just so fascinating that big of a mind shift could happen in such a short amount of time for me. And so that was another, big reason why I was just fascinated by how quickly my mind shift had changed and how what I changed, what I was doing and how I was eating, the science behind why that made such a big difference in my life.
Yeah. When, so what I find fascinating, so let's talk about this coma kind of thing that occurred. What's fascinating is that kind of condition usually happens with endurance athletes through the course of and Tom knows this, right? As an endurance athlete, right? If you start drinking water, your stomach is sort of irritated during big, nasty events. These are like Ironman distance, big ultra marathons. That's generally when people have this issue because they aren't taking food in, they're not in there, all that sort of stuff. Yours kind of slowly, I don't want to say slowly develop, but it's rather unusual to kind of get that way with that type of condition. Walk us through sort of how that, to your point, I mean, you were probably shocked, right? When that occurred, obviously, but how do you, was it just, I'm fascinated by this. Was it just too clean of eating? I mean, was it, because most of America has a sodium problem and, they should be cutting down on sodium, but most America's not running like you're doing. So how did that kind of come out?
Yeah, so it definitely developed slowly over a couple of months. I was eating very clean. I was cooking all my
Mm.
own food. And I, like I said, didn't know what electrolytes were. I didn't
Sure.
know that was something that was important to put in my drinks at all.
Mhm.
And so I essentially had zero sodium in my diet. And I'm also just particularly prone to being low in sodium because I'm a very salty sweater.
Mhm.
So, for everyone who's listening who doesn't know, like, you are just genetically predispositioned to be somewhere along the scale of not as salty to a very salty sweater. And that changes your needs of sodium whenever you're replenishing before and after your workouts, especially as, higher endurance athletes. I'm running 60 miles a week now. My needs have definitely gone up because of that. But I was essentially doing none of that. And so over those 2 months, it kind of built up. It was so weird because I was definitely feeling more depressed. I couldn't really focus in class. My brain wasn't really working the way I needed it to, or I couldn't really, whenever I was in class, it was all I could think about was getting to the next meal. And then once I ate, I was my brain could think clearly, and I had no clue what was happening, but I was I've been working so hard all summer to get to the state cross country meet. I had never come close to qualifying before. And now I was supposed to be one of the top 10 in the state. And I was putting all this weight on it. It's the biggest deal in the world. And the weekend before that meet, I started feeling sick. We drove up to Austin and we thought it was just car sickness or the place we had stopped for lunch. And I actually was throwing up, and that exacerbated the problem a lot. Obviously dropped my sodium levels way more significantly than they were before, which is how I got into such a dangerous position so quickly over that weekend. And essentially it was the night before the meet, and I was, we had ordered pasta into the hotel. My poor team, I felt so bad. They had all stayed in at the hotel and ordered in because I was feeling so sick. I was y'all go, it's fine. They're no, Emily, we're gonna hang out with you. So that was really, really cool to just feel supported by them. But I couldn't eat the pasta. I tried to take a bite and I was I feel terrible. So I just went to bed, and my parents had gone out to meet some friends for dinner. And so they asked my coach to come and check on me an hour later. And so he came in with my roommate, and I looked like I was asleep, and I went to bed super early at the time. So he could have just let me go to sleep, but he came over and shook my shoulder. And whenever he did that, I actually looked like I had a seizure. I started convulsing. So that's when he called the ambulance, and the paramedics came and got me, brought me to the hospital. And what was so crazy was if he hadn't come in to check on me and shake my shoulder, I probably wouldn't have made it through the night.
Crazy.
So that's just, really surreal, and speaks to the importance of checking in on the people around you too.
Yeah.
So here you are, you're waking up from a coma, basically. How did you find out about it? And then once you found out about it, that's a huge leap to go from sort of look what happened to me. I decided to write a book about it. Was that part of that 4-hour work week kind of mentality you had, or what was this? What was the shock of sort of waking up and once you find out what was going on? Let's start with that one first, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, it was extremely shocking. I didn't really know what to think. And the reason why it took me 2 days to wake up from the coma is because you have to raise your sodium levels extremely slowly for fear of your brain swelling too quickly. So my brain definitely still swole a little bit. And so for the next week and a half, I wasn't really, able to focus nearly as clearly, and which wasn't really myself. And that was obviously super scary to my parents. They didn't really know, if I would ever come back to normal. And so it was really that shock after waking up from that, feeling like both myself and everyone around me felt like I was doing everything perfectly. To anyone looking from the outside in,
right?
I was doing everything perfectly. And so that was the kind of big shocker that inspired me to write the book, was that whenever you're at this young age and you're trying to learn things on your own, it can be super easy to get lost in the weeds and kind of lose the big picture when you're being so focused on doing things as society might deem to be healthy.
So when you decided to go after the book, did you have sort of there's a major theme in mind, but what was the key messages you want to make sure to get out of this book besides the specifics, right?
Yeah, no, the key messaging was definitely it's super hard, but trying to teach younger athletes how to find this balance for themselves. and not get too wrapped up in trying to have everything exactly perfectly, and somehow figuring out how to teach those fundamentals to where they could use nutrition to help them reach their super big athletic goals without letting it consume them and without letting it take away from their life. That was a big piece of it, was making sure that it was adding to your life rather than taking away from it.
So finding a balance in all of that, trying to go the right direction, but not going all the way over the direction. So
Absolutely.
what's the top tips that you
Yeah.
would give
So
a high school athlete starting out?
Yeah, so I have the book broken up into two sections, and the
Mhm.
first half is all education, and the second half is all teaching about balance. So I actually interviewed a bunch of elite athletes and registered dietitians and asked them what they wish they had known at the beginning of their career, or what they wish other athletes knew starting out. And I got to interview such incredible people like April Ross, Olympic gold medalist, Jesse Thomas, two-time Ironman champ,
Mhm.
Marshall Kozlowski. He is a part of the Los Angeles Dodgers organization, and they just obviously won the World Series last year. And I was able to really, get to learn from their stories, these core sports nutrition concepts that
Mhm.
made a really big impact in their lives and their careers. And I gave each person their own chapter. So that way I could tell their story and have one core sports nutrition concept come from their story.
Mhm.
And then I have a recipe at the end of the chapter teaching you how to put into practice what you just learned. So this way I kind of was teaching these concepts throughout the book by telling stories without just like spewing facts and spewing knowledge that wouldn't be as absorbed as easily. And, a couple of examples, Marshall Kozlowski's chapter is all about sleep and different
Mhm.
nutritional methods and things you can do to make sure that you're maximizing both the quality and quantity of your sleep. And, that's super different for every athlete. For me, it was not eating enough carbohydrates throughout the day. I wasn't able to fall asleep that quickly, and I wasn't able to have high quality sleep because I wasn't meeting these needs for myself. And for him, he was having super late baseball games and he wasn't
Mhm.
able to fall asleep after that. That's not anything to do with, him being a bad, having bad self-control. It's just how the nature of the sport is. And he was all amped up for his games. And so his tips were more about finding supplements and different methods that he could do after his games to calm down his body and his mind and be able to fall asleep. And, one of those things was um, supplementing magnesium. And
Mhm.
that's a particular vitamin. People talk about melatonin all the time, but magnesium is also super important to being able to help you get this higher quality sleep. So there are a couple of cool little tidbits and just little snippets like that in each chapter that teach you how to maximize different aspects of your nutrition.
Nice.
Yeah, we actually, one of our previous podcasts, actually, we brought on one of a sleep expert that was working with the MLB on exactly that and how important sleep
Wow.
is.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges that we have, we spend a lot of time with student athletes trying to get them to understand recovery is a critical portion of their needs to be a critical portion of their work of their week. Um, back to sort of what your high school life was about the idea of eating pizza or doing whatever that you personally were able to go, hey, this is actually making me feel better. Funny thing about teenagers, sometimes they don't like to listen, or that, it's the good news is I think you're closer to their age. So they're probably going to pay attention to you rather than, somebody like me, like, back in my day when we were, that kind of thing. But what's the reception? Are you finding the reception to be good or better as it feels to me that students are getting smarter as things are progressing along? Are you seeing that as well? How are you able to kind of get those guys to say, look, you're not invincible, everything's not perfect, right? I know your social media portrays that, but pay attention to those things. How are you kind of breaking through that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of athletes are now starting to realize this at a younger age because they're older role models like me and other
Mhm.
professional athletes coming out to talk about the importance of what you're putting in your body. And, there are a lot of little athletes that have really big dreams, and
Mhm.
that is helping them be more inspired to follow more,
Yep.
regimented ideas like this. But I guess for those that might not be as motivated, I think that being able to learn it through the stories of other athletes that
Mhm.
are the most successful at their sport is what really is helping it to be more absorbable
Sure.
and really be more relatable for them to be inspired by it and be like, oh wait, this actually might apply to me too.
Yeah. And the more we talk about, the more we have podcasts like this, and the more we're able to bring it up, it becomes a normal course of the conversation, that it's not this kind of weird anomaly. There's another kind of societal issue with food, right? Kind of two things about food, right? We're always told that fat is bad, salt is bad, things are bad, right? Bad, 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 bad.
Mm-hmm.
And for student athletes to hear that, again, with societal kind of doing that, but food is such an intrinsic part of our society, right? We gather around food, we celebrate with food, right? We have Thanksgiving coming up, which is entirely centered around food, and Dallas Cowboys go. So is that something that is acknowledged in the book? Is it something that I think that to me has always been a difficult thing as a person that's been in healthcare for 20 years, is to try to understand that you can't just say, well, you just don't do this. To your point, you're with your friends are like, what are you doing? Like, you're ordering this, we're trying to do this, or you try to go to a specific restaurant that is absolute garbage, right? So Waffle House is probably not the best place to be grabbing stuff to do. You've experienced that yourself? Is that something that how do you see that being tackled? Sort of that the ability to be able to still be that social person that society says it's okay for you to do that. And I know that you personally were able to do that. Do you see that as a challenge as well, or how do you see that as being tackled?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually talk about this in the book. I talk about dealing with that kind of struggle, being pulled between two different ways of, so specifically I have a chapter where I interview Alan Lim, and he's worked on the Tour de France.
Yep.
And he has written 3 different cookbooks. He's the founder of Scratch Labs. He's obviously very well known and respected in the sports nutrition world and sports world in general. And the focus of his chapter is actually nothing to do with hydration or nutrition, but everything about the importance of eating with others.
Yeah.
And how important that is to your mental health, and especially on team sports, being able to compete with each other and for each other out on the court, because eating together is one of the most human things we can do, and one of the most bonding experiences that we can have. So, in this chapter, I talk about, okay, so what do you do when your team's going out to eat Whataburger and you want to be able to still hang out with them? And it's obviously a balance. I mean, that's a core tenet throughout the whole book. And finding out when the timing is that it works well for you to eat with them. Even if you want to bring your own food and still go to the place with them, that works too. But just being able to think about the timing and do whatever is going to make you feel the best at the end of the day. If you feel like you've got enough time before your next competition, you've been fueling yourself super well for like the whole past week, been cooking your own meals, you've gotten a lot of nutrients, and you really want to be able to enjoy this meal with your teammates, do it. The emotional and societal and psychological benefit that you'll get from that is so much more than you would get from staying at home and cooking another perfectly macro balanced meal, So that's the whole important part, is making sure that the 80% of the time you are meeting your needs and doing exactly what you have been taught is great for recovery and helping maximize your performance. But then that other 20% of the time, you can utilize this huge piece of your life, which is eating, to also help contribute to your mental health and the psychological aspect of competing as an athlete as well.
And I'm glad to hear that you've got that in your book. I think it's fantastic because I think a lot of the focus has been on sort of the science of it, not the emotion of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't include the emotion of it, the idea of it's a gathering, that it's people coming together, that it's so inextricably tied with sort of our societal way that we interact, that if you try to separate those two, I think that's where some of these books fail, right? And
we focus on clean eating, and then we focus on our mental health on the other side, and you just go, well, actually they work together.
We're all unique. We're whole beings.
You can't put one over here and put the other one over here and then talk about like in silos. It doesn't happen.
So it's fantastic. So you're a senior. What you're a published author. You're a podcaster now. Welcome to the club. What are you wanting to do when you get out of that Duke uniform? What is the future for Emily?
That's a great question. I'm still kind of working on, what exactly I want to be doing work-wise, but I obviously have built up a bigger presence on social media, and with my running, I would love to be able to continue running post college for a little bit. So
Cool.
if I could have a little bit of time to be able to focus on running and my social media for at least a little bit after college, I think that'd be great.
What's
I've been
your
spread in a
distance?
lot of different ways.
What distances are you running?
So for cross country, everyone races a 6K. And then for the track, I focus on the 1500 and the steeplechase.
Nice.
So
great.
steeplechase is actually the race that I was able to have my big season in last year and be able to run in the US champs. So that was really fun.
Nice.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You get to see Emma sort of rip by. And so,
yeah, I raced her.
Did you?
Yeah.
Does anybody race her, or does she just sort of run and everybody else tries to catch her? It almost feels like at times. Sometimes
there are a few girls up there with her. She's got some competition for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think you guys are absolutely giving them a run for the money. That's fantastic. So Oprah hasn't called yet on the book. Not
she hasn't. I
it's
know.
not in the book.
No.
We'll have to talk to her next week.
We're working on that one.
Yeah.
So, and your podcast, what is your primary focus of your podcast? Oh, we lost you.
So my podcast is actually about, can you hear me? Hello?
Yep. You're there. We had a little delay.
So my podcast is actually about name, image, and likeness. So obviously I'm a student athlete, and in the last year, all of the laws around athletes being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness have changed. And that has, put a huge change in all of our lives. And being an athlete in the midst of it, I started this podcast with Christy Dodge, who's the founder of the Business of College Sports. She writes for Forbes about name, image, and likeness, and has really created a name for herself in the media space. And so we kind of can provide two very different perspectives on this. And we bring in the top athletes, really making the most with their name, image, and likeness, and ask them about their journeys and different lessons and recommendations they have for the next generation. So that's been really cool to get to learn from them and share their experiences in the show.
Does that, it's interesting. We had a previous podcast, we were talking about the NIL and sort of the pressure that it was for, I think we had a nutritionist on that we were talking about that, working with college sports. Do you, with your theme of your book, trying to eat clean and try to do clean, but there's probably pressure from an NIL licensing standpoint. You probably have supplement companies that are wanting you to sponsor them, or to pay you to be able to advertise for them. Do you, with an NIL, is there do you feel like there needs to be an education on student athletes and on athletes to say, hey, when you attach your name to something, first, know what you're doing? I know we've, in full disclosure, Tom and I get a few podcast, requests for requests for shows or whatever on stuff we just simply don't believe in, so it's not going to be on there. Help us understand that. Is that something that you guys are trying to work with on making sure from a nutrition, again, from kind of that nutrition standpoint, on it's a lot of money, I get it, but at the same time, if it's not not legal for for the NCAA, and B, not good or sketchy at best.
That temptation has got to be there.
How do you guys teach that temptation? Yeah.
No, I mean, that's kind of the point of the podcast, kind of getting to hear it from all these athletes who've gone through it and made those calls where they said no to different brands that didn't align with their values, and all of the importance of figuring out what your values are and figuring out what you want your brand to be and learning how to make those decisions. That's kind of the point and the lessons that we're trying to teach for the show. Me personally, I've had to do that a ton, just because with my brand being aligned with nutrition, I'll have more food companies reach out to me. But obviously there are so many that have, weight loss and cut on their stuff. I'm like, this is not the goal. That's not the idea.
All right. So we're not going to see a pre-workout by Emily anytime soon.
No.
Loaded up with so my son still wants to do the pre-workout called Liver Damage, and I told him it's probably would sell.
Oh my gosh.
I know it would sell, unfortunately, because a bunch of teenage kids are kind of idiots when it comes to that. So so that's very cool. So what do you got coming up? What's going on besides you basking in glory of a fantastic, I'm really excited about your book, by the way. So and you're running, what do you got going on?
So I just finished my cross country season. We did great. We finished our regionals, and our region is really hard. Last year we finished 11th, and this year we finished 5th. So that was a big improvement. Thank you. And I had actually been struggling with not being, I was doing a lot of different things and not being as focused. It's funny, you like, even with as much time and thought that I put into nutrition, I was doing too many things and wasn't nailing down my hydration as well as I should have been. And just really was hitting a wall towards the end of my races, and realized after, one of my races that that's what the issue was. And I was like, oh my gosh, Emily, you know this, like, you're the queen of knowing to put salt in your water too. Like, anyways, so at the end of the day, we're all human and we all make mistakes. And so I got that fixed for my last race and was able to have a great race and finish out the season strong, which was awesome. And obviously now super excited to be getting into track season. We have, the holiday break, and then indoor season starts right after that. And then outdoor track will be starting around March-ish. So really excited for both of those. And, I haven't really gotten to have a super fun indoor season yet. So I'm very excited about this year coming up.
Cool.
Very good.
Yeah, I think getting people to understand that there's, like, you've added a lot of stresses. You've got the books, you've got everything else kind of going on.
Yeah.
Your body doesn't know the difference between training stress and life stress.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
You're constantly having to adjust for your nutrition and your nutrients and things that you're taking in. So it's one of those things that you'll always be chasing. And then
That's
as
actually
you get older and your body changes and your metabolism changes and you're just chasing it again, it should be a fun journey to enjoy eating with a bunch of other people, and then just finding the right foods that work for you at that time. I mean, that's always good.
I
So
actually
I'm glad you're bringing that up.
I love that you brought that point up, because that's actually what my whole conclusion is about. So in the
Nice.
conclusion, I talk about how, like, my journey has evolved throughout writing the book, and how halfway through I learned that I had celiac disease. And so all the work that I had done to starting to eat more carbs, it was like I was doing the right thing, but it wasn't exactly what my body needed. And so it still wasn't helping me out. And that was a huge piece that I found out that helped change my career and helped me be able to have the great track season that I did. And how, you can see through that all of our stories are, forever evolving. And the biggest lesson that you can take from the book and going into your life trying to optimize your sports nutrition is keeping an open mind and knowing that your needs are going to change continuously for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Well, and also you're asking questions, and you're not okay with the answer on some of that stuff, right? And that's critically important. Is you, hey, it's, I'm supposed to be doing the carb thing, it's not working, find out you have celiac disease, right? You continue to ask the question, right? So always being curious about making sure, am I doing the right things? I mean, even, old farts like us, I mean, we're still trying to figure out, I bonk all the time because I don't get enough fluids in, because I'm not figuring out how to get those fluids to get past my stomach, and I'm sloshing around. And I mean, it's a lifelong, it's a lifelong adventure to Tom's point, because your body changes and things change and weather changes and, stress changes and everything else. So it's fantastic.
I'm just glad you're embracing it and bringing it out to the next generations. I mean, that's stuff we need to keep talking about more. It's all really good. So
thank you. Means a lot.
So what's the name of the book? So we can.
The name of the book is called The Player's Plate. And so I kind of tie in that idea of, the saying of not putting too much on your plate. It's not just about what's physically on your plate, but also in your plate of life as well, and learning how to balance all of the societal and psychological aspects of fueling as well.
Nice. And I like that you have Jesse Thomas in there, because I'm a big fan of his. Actually, Picky Bars Ambassador. Myself, I've been eating Picky Bars since the day they came out. Love
they're incredible.
The nutrition. Yeah, the work that him and Laura have done, and their other partners, fantastic. So
exactly.
That's great.
Thank you.
We can follow you on TikTok and Instagram.
We'll post up. Yep. So Instagram, my username is just Emily Cole. And you can find the book at theplayer'splate.com. Can also get it on Amazon. The hardback should be out, in the next day or so too. So that's super exciting. You can get the paperback, the hardback, or the ebook version. And eventually I will be releasing an audiobook as well.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. And the holidays are coming up. At least this should come out before Christmas. We'll be posting this up probably in the next week or two. So you can run out, and it's the perfect holiday gift for all your loved ones, to get them going in the right direction and eating all of that. So super.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to know, Kenny, any other questions?
No, I think that's it. We really appreciate your time today, Emily.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you very much. All your comments, thumbs up, 5 stars, any of the reviews helps us all, helps the algorithms and gets us out to a wider audience. So we appreciate all your feedback on that. Emily, again, thank you so much. Good luck with the coming season and everything else. And thank you so much for being on.
Of course. No, thank you, Tom and Kenny. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on the show.